Yeah. Everything plugged in, I think so. Hello, everybody.
Howdy, ma'am.
Thanks. I was wondering if anybody heard me. It's nice to see you all.
Hello, hello.
Hi. Well, we're waiting for people to come in. Let me make sure I've got things set up the way I want them to. Okay, good. So I can see my toolbar at the bottom. Stuff, cool. We've got a lot to talk about this week, and I admit I was just creating new PowerPoint slides up to the very last minute. But so that's going to be great. We're going to dive into the nuts and bolts of starting a business today. And I'm going to tell you about the resources that I like to use and some of the resources available to you guys. I also want to mention that I have completed the roster of speakers for the year, and I've got basically representatives from most of Vancouver's, major web agencies. I've got the legal eagle that I wanted to bring back, and so he's agreed to return. Got a couple of Clark instructors who, one of which is Robert Lacoste, the user experience teacher. And he's going to be talking about, the user experience of, business being in work and how to master that. And Nathan Webster, who basically teaches, I've seen him teaching a lot of courses about entrepreneurship and stuff. So I'm not really sure what his official title is here at Clark, but I'll find out. So today was the one day I could not find a live speaker. So what we're going to do for our speaker today is I'm going to replay the video from last year's class where my friend Dana Ward wasn't available for this year's class. She's going to talk all about how to find and create RFPs and proposals, which is the way a lot of agencies find work. So, so we're going to cover that. And in a minute, I'm going to review the list of speakers with you all. But before we go any further, did anybody have any questions about last week, or, is everybody now on to Slack? Does anybody have?
No, I haven't been able to get into Slack. It says like my invitation's invalid.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Thank you for letting me know.
I've been meaning to message you on Canvas about that.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. So let me make a note of that and we can follow up. So Chris M. Is anybody else still having issues getting into Slack?
I have a question. How do I watch a recording of the class meeting from last week?
Okay, good. I will show you where that is when we get into Canvas.
All right.
So we've got that. And luckily, I had set this class up correctly. It turns out that when I'd set up my WordPress Zoom session, it wasn't set to record automatically. So unfortunately, thanks, Ryan. So Ryan just put a link for joining Slack that Chris, maybe you can try and see if that works for you. But, and then if you still aren't able to get in at the end of the class, I'll follow up. Thank you, Ryan, for doing that. Yeah, so So unfortunately, WordPress class didn't record last week and there were a couple people missing. So it was a little frustrating. But the fact that, everybody, we do have a recording for this one. So I will show you where that is. I think one person told me they were going to be absent, so that's good. Once again, let me remind you, if you're going to be absent, do let me know, either on Slack or in Canvas or wherever, just, so I can make a note of it, because I do take attendance. And that is one of the things that, we have to pay attention to. So with that, let me get started with my screen sharing. Let me just. Okay, now we get back to Zoom and cool. All right, as far as, let's go back to modules here. And minimize. So I am in student view now, and it looks like I published the meetings, but they weren't there. So let's see what happens when I go to Panopto. Here we go. So you can always find the recordings here. I did actually make a module for the recordings, but apparently I haven't published it. So right now I'm in the student view, and I will make sure that that is published. But yes, in the Panopto recordings, you can always go and find the recordings for, and then, so this one is the one for last week. This is the one that we're going to watch today. So actually we'll have two recordings for today. So there, and let me get back to modules here. It's always good for me to look at this in the student view so I see what you guys are seeing. All right, so the guest speaker schedule. Let's just take a quick look at that. So yes, last week I was the guest speaker, and we kind of talked about the Internet of Things, the state of the internet. So today we're going to be covering nuts and bolts of being in business, how to get started, what are the procedures and processes and stuff like that. And Dana Ward of Jacobs Engineering is going to be a recorded guest speaker. Next week, we'll have Rob Lacoste, and he is always a fun presenter. So right now he's teaching user experience at Clark, and he also is a user experience designer for Milwaukee Tools, which is an interest. This is a job he got recently, and it sounds like it's really a lot of fun for him. So do that. So week 4, we'll have Allison Drake, and she is a Clark web dev alum. So she's a graduate of Clark College. So she's working at Northwest and Associates. The next week we'll have Trisha Davis Payne, who also is an alumnus of this program. So it's really great for me to see my former students out there and, and have them come back and return to, contribute to the program. So week 6, we'll have Chris Martin Studios. He also has a podcast. I think the name of his podcast is Getting Work to Work. And I want to make sure that you guys have, links to his podcast, because it's very interesting. It's all about business stuff. So Web content marketing is going to be week 7. And for that, we're going to have Aaron Hockley, who is a professional photographer. And he just wrote a book about what the AI of photography marketing or something. So we'll find out more about that. But I actually heard Aaron speak the first time at WordCamp about 10 years ago. And he was talking about blogging and, you know, marketing yourself through blogging. So that will be interesting. Stephen Housley from Gravitate will be week 8. So I don't really know Stephen very well, but he's a good friend of Bruce Elgort. So I'll be interesting to hear what he has to say. And I think we talked about shifting his topic. It's probably going to be more about search engine marketing. So the basics of search marketing. Week 9, we'll have Michael Jonas from Rational Unicorn Legal Services. And he will give us a really quick overview of the legal elements, what you need to have as far as contracts and, you know, all of your legal agreements here, you know, how to write things and where to find resources for that. His firm does a number of small business webinars, like, you know, short webinars on Zoom about various elements of running a business too. So they're an interesting agency to just kind of, you know, keep an eye on. And then the last week, on the following week is Thanksgiving, so we won't be having a class then. But week 11, it's going to be about failure. Fail harder, how failure builds success. Because if there's one thing that probably, you know, you can count on in life and business is there will be failures. You know, it's just the way it is. And it's something that, you know, if you pay attention and you learn, you know, the lessons and stuff, really failure can be your biggest advantage. When you think about, you know, I've heard stories about how many times Walt Disney failed in business, and, you know, just a lot of the, you know, the big entrepreneurs really had to struggle and try different things before they figured out how to make it work. So, of course, I don't want any of you to fail the class. So hopefully that won't happen. All right. So any questions or comments about the speakers that we have for the rest of the year? Okay.
Can Robert get us a discount on Milwaukee tools?
I don't know. Good question. We can ask him.
I have Robert's class on Tuesdays.
Oh, you do? Okay, great. So you'll get a double dose. Excellent. I work with Robert on the board of Kaifu as well, which is also something I should mention to you guys, that next week for Kaifu, we're going to have a panel discussion about how, you know, how to make the switch, how to move from like an adjacent, you know, business role into user experience. So how to get a UX job, which I think is going to be great. All right, so this is, so, I'm actually created slides. I usually don't do slides, you guys. So you guys are really lucky or not, I don't know. It depends on how much you like PowerPoint. But so we have this PDF, but I'm going to present it from the PowerPoint itself. And let me make sure that, okay, I'm going to stop sharing, and then I think I have to share the PowerPoint. All right. So this is really a simplified rundown of, the basic steps to starting a business. And quite frankly, when I got started, I had done a few freelance projects and stuff, but once I decided that, yeah, maybe I wanted to make it into a real business, I was pretty clueless about how to get started. So I actually found that the SBDC, which is a Small Business Development Corporation, it's a government agency. It's paid for our tax dollars. And they had free, you could sign up with a counselor to actually work with, someone to coach you into how to get a business. And they had all these different classes and stuff. So she worked with me and basically helped me accomplish, these various tasks that we'll go through. And I also have provided their website as a slide in the module. And I strongly encourage any of you that if you're thinking about going into a business, please consider them as a resource, because it really made a huge amount of difference for me. And it would have been a lot harder. It would have been a lot harder. And, of course, I wasn't interested in going and getting a business degree. I just wanted to start making websites for people. All right, so the first step is finding your niche. So when you start off thinking about, I want to build websites for people. Well, how many web designers are there in the Portland, Vancouver area? And there's probably a gazillion. I don't know. That's not an exact number, but there are many of them. And figuring out where am I most effective, kind of like who needs the services I can provide? What can I do as a single person business? It took me a while to figure out. And basically my niche is small businesses just getting started, and artists and musicians, because they needed, they always need to have something, some kind of presence up on the web, and nonprofits. So, it's kind of a broad niche, but it's pretty specific. One of the things I figured out as I went along is that the businesses who are just starting out are probably not at the right target market for me, because, I can't afford to do websites for $500. And, that's not going to give me enough income. And these days there are so many options out there like Wix and Squarespace and stuff. So I decided that probably my best target market is businesses who are on their second or third website that figured out it's like, oh, there's a bunch of stuff that we really want to have happen on our website that we just can't do with a basic website builder. Yeah.
If I may speak for a moment on a topic, personally speaking, it feels really daunting, the idea of trying to start a business or find a niche in a market that is undeniably probably really competitive and has a lot of people who are gunning for the same position.
A lot of oversaturation.
What do you have to say to like ease the nerves of someone who's worried about getting stomped by the competition?
Yes. Well, for example, I think that, when we're just throwing out ideas last week, somebody was talking about building a business, having craft nights for Dungeons and Dragons players to paint the little mini figurines. Kind of like, so kind of like finding something that is like so specific. So if, finding the need is the biggest thing. And that's where this market research comes in. So,
And I-
without market research, you'd be saying, oh, sure, I can design websites. Let's go start designing websites. And then you're competing against Gravitate, and you're competing against Web4, and it just is, yeah, it is really daunting. So that's why the research is pretty important. We'll talk more about that in a second.
Can I throw something out,
Thank
Feline?
you.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to work for somebody else for a while too.
Yeah.
I know people are incredibly entrepreneurial and go out and make radical successes of themselves. I've tried that a couple times. I'm a much better team player. So I'm looking for a job rather than starting my own business
Right?
for now. If
Yeah.
I run into that niche and I can do something on my own, I'm all about doing that. But I've learned over, 56 years that I'm a much better team player, even if I'm the captain of the team, rather than being just out on my own. So, I mean, don't be afraid to go get a job for a while too.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that I do want to point out today, it's going to be how to start a business and kind of like those kind of steps and stuff. But a lot of this applies to being an internal employee. How do you find the job that is going to be a great fit for you? What kind of companies do you want to work for? So a lot of this kind of stuff is cross-training kind of a skill, I guess. All right, so once you figure out what your target market is, designing your product or services, so figure out what exactly you're going to offer in your business.
Question.
Yeah.
Sorry, Philippe. I've been meaning to ask this for like a few days now. So right here, you said design your products or your services. When you build websites for people, once it's done, do they pay you to maintain it, or do you tell them at this point you're on your own?
Well, they can pay me to maintain it, or sometimes with a lot of my clients, I let them know that maintenance, is something that needs to happen regularly on a website, and I can do it for time and materials, every few months, and so that's how most of my clients work. But I do offer maintenance subscriptions as one of my services, and that really works out well for a small number of my clients. So that's a good point.
Noted. Okay.
Great. So choosing your business name, I'll talk more about that in a second, but you have to have your business name. Then getting around to, what about the money? Setting up a separate bank account. How do you handle the insurance aspect of it? So we'll talk more about that in a minute. Then when you have, your bank account, then you have to and you've chosen your business name, then you need to, make sure that you've got estimates and contracts in place. So, and then once you have that, branding and website, marketing your services, and go forth and getting the clients. So
I think the marketing and
steps.
services is what scares a lot of people.
Yeah, yes.
Where do we go? How do we do this? A lot of people are left in the dark overall about, I have this thing and I have this idea, but social media is not going to do it.
Yeah, well, in a few minutes, we'll get to the marketing slide and then we'll talk about that. So finding your niche, it starts off with what is it that you want to do? Kind of like, I want to do this. And then finding your target market is where a lot of the research comes in. So it's like online research, who needs this kind of stuff. Lots of times you won't even know who your target market really is until you get started, and then you can refine it. So, like I said, finding out that, oh, small businesses, every small business needs a website. And then kind of like figuring out, oh, probably not the small business that is just starting off because they think they can do it with a Facebook page or a Wix website or something, but one that has decided, oh, I really need something more professional. Then analyzing their needs. You know, how do they fill that need now? You know, what are they doing right now to get, you know, get that taken care of? Also looking at who is the competition. And as you mentioned, it can be really daunting just to look out there and see all these really cool web design agencies and, you know, with big staff and huge teams and all this stuff. So with the competition, where do they succeed and where do they fail? A lot of the big web agencies are really expensive for clients to work with. So they might, you know, that might be one area where you can offer something. And then finding what is your unique proposition to offer them. So, you know, do you have a particular set of skills that is going to really fit their needs and make you, you know, a person that they want to hire. So once you figured out your target market, designing your product, you know, so what are the skills you already have? It might be that you need to, you know, add on some skills like, you know, for example, one of the things I do for clients is cartography, and that, you know, that's a skill I have because, you know, I worked at TriMet for 15 years. So, yeah, sometimes, you know, having jobs where you can build those skills and get some extra training could be a way to develop the skills you need for your business. Figuring out how do you meet the identified need, finding the required tools, you know, do you need better internet, you know, do you need, you know, you need your laptop, you know, in my case, I've got my laptop, I've got 2 monitors, I've got good Wi-Fi, I've got a printer. So some of those things, luckily, it doesn't take much as far as equipment to do an online business. Identify the needed resources, you know, so what are some of the things? Do I need a drawing tablet? Do I need a really good camera? Things like that. And then market test your idea. So that can be as simple as, you know, calling up a, you know, a couple friends and saying, well, if you were this kind of business, you know, what would you be looking for? Would these things, would these skills, you know, work for you? And, you know, basically that's more research. So the business name. So in a way, these days, I would start with the domain name. Because, you know, the domain registry is an international registry. And if you can find a business name that works well as a domain and has an interesting, you know, a good variation with that, start with the domain name and then register your business name with the state. I will show you the page for doing that in just a minute, but the state of Oregon, when I used it, it has a listing of all of the, you know, various businesses registered in the state. So I could go through and see if there are any other Sirius medias. And at the time, Sirius Satellite Radio, XM, is not listed as a business in the state of Oregon. So there was no competition there. There was another Sirius something or other, but I think that they were like a bookkeeping agency or something. And it's always a good idea if, you know, if and when you have the resources available to do that, is to trademark your unique name. I haven't trademarked Sirius Media, but I probably should. So we'll find out more about that when Michael Jonas comes to talk. So after you've got your business name, you know what your business is going to do, and you've got your business name, set up a separate bank account for the business. It makes a world of difference, and it makes bookkeeping so much easier, because you will have to do your taxes eventually. And it's really hard when you've got money going into, you know, a Venmo account here and a PayPal there, and somebody Zelled you over here, and then you've got, you know, money in your personal account, and trying to straighten that all out, it makes it really messy. So definitely get yourself a business account, business bank account. And a lot of places, credit unions are really a great way to do that, because I think credit unions offer you, you know, starter business accounts and stuff. And then you need basic business insurance. So I've got business insurance. It costs me $24 a month. But if I work with any government entity, like, you know, I've done contracts with TriMet and Clark County and OHSU, and they're all going to require that you have business insurance. Working with, you know, your friends, building a website for your friend might not require business insurance, but it's always a good idea. One of the things that it helps protect you from is you build a website and it ends up getting hacked, and it costs, you know, your client money because they were hacked and they lose business. It helps cover that cost, so they don't come after you for that. One of my biggest issues when I got started was I couldn't get health insurance. My health insurance had always been through my employer, but I had pre-existing conditions. I got turned down from 5 different insurance agencies. And until the Affordable Care Act came along, I was really stuck with not having health insurance. So the fact that I could get affordable health insurance, you know, it made a huge difference to me. Having things like life insurance and disability insurance are also things that your business, you know, can invest in and provide for you. So that always, you know, right now I've never had disability insurance, but it's something I probably should do. So getting the legal stuff in place, working up a solid business contract, and make sure that it includes things like a deposit to begin work is a really good idea. First few years, I didn't require it, but I found that it was pretty standard business practice, so people expected it. And it really meant that, you know, before you did any work, this person was committing a certain amount of money to paying you. So if you don't ask for a deposit, you can end up doing, you know, 100 hours of work in a month, and then, you know, send them the bill and they're like, wait a minute, I didn't like anything you did. So it always is a good idea. It makes them committed to it, and it, you know, it basically gives you something to work with. Talking about deadlines, cancellation clause, copyright protection, website ownership, you know, all those kind of things should be in your contract. I started off originally with, I bought a packet of web business legal documents, and it was really a basic contract. And I've enhanced it a little bit since then. It's not nearly as complex as something that, you know, you would probably get if you went into a lawyer, but it seems to, it's simple enough for people to understand. And it just is a way for both of us to agree what's going to happen. Developing a template for your estimates. So it's just a lot easier to do an estimate for somebody if you have you know, kind of a standard statement of work, kind of a contract. Your billing, bookkeeping software, yeah, this is all, you know, done online these days. And I'll show you what I use, time tracking software as well. So getting that stuff in place and knowing how you're going to keep track of all of this stuff. So you've gotten your business name and you know your target market, and you've, you know, gotten your banking and your business, you know, licenses and all that stuff. Now you can start thinking about your branding and your website. Of course, you've probably been doing that all the way along as you deal with the other stuff, but coming up with your business brand just makes things a lot easier. You know, branding is really important. So having a good logo that's going to work at small sizes and large sizes, online, you know, in print. So your logo, your color palette, what fonts are you going to use consistently? That's all part of, you know, keeping your business brand together. Your writing style. So that's something that a lot of people don't really consider. But, you know, are you going to, you know, present your work at, you know, in a lighthearted, irreverent kind of way? Like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with MailChimp, but they, you know, have a writing style and a persona that is really, you know, you can identify it as their brand, even if you haven't seen the logo. Like, oh, that, you know, sounds like MailChimp. Stuff like that. So all of those are kind of part of your, you know, your brand, the personality of your website. And then, you know, building your website itself. So getting together your content, what are your calls to action going to be? How do you get people interested in what you have to offer? What kind of imagery are you going to use? You know, photos and, you know, are you going to use photos or animation or illustration or videos? All of those things are, you know, elements to your website. And last but not least are print materials. So print still has a role to play. I think that, you know, certainly probably not as much as it used to, but, you know, it haven't had anyone to hand business cards to in the last year and a half. But, you know, once things, you know, start up again, as far as networking goes, it's really great to have a little, you know, business card you can just leave with people. You're in a restaurant and you chat with somebody about, you know, something at the next table, and they're like, oh, you know, do you do websites? And so, you know, you can just hand them the card. It really, you know, that's the thing that starts everything. So probably don't need brochures as much, but it's you know, good to have some of that stuff. All right, marketing. So advertising really helps. You can start online via social media ads. You know, if you have the budget. If you don't have the budget, you can start online via social media posts. So, you know, start posting in your own accounts about, you know, hey, I'm starting a business, and do you know, start dropping some of the little facts you learned in your market research. Did you know that X number of businesses, you know, need blah, 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 you know, that kind of thing. Just, you know, find posts that are of interest to your target market and share them. One of the things about Facebook and Instagram ads, and I guess there's Twitter ads, and now there's Pinterest ads, is that you can set a budget, say, you know, I've got $100 to spend, and you can really zero in on target demographics. So when I had a client who was a jazz singer, I could, target her ads to people who lived within 50 miles of the Portland area who liked Peggy Lee and Frank Sinatra and were probably over 40 years old and, made over $50,000. So, people who had the money to go out, who liked to go hear, jazz music and were of the age group that, that were interested in that. So, once again, print ads, they still are, something that people look at. Brochures, brochures, that the advantage of a brochure is that you can leave something behind. So coffee shops and, used to have like these little, stacks of brochures and stuff. So the print stuff, probably not as important now. It is expensive. That's one thing, is that ads and brochures can be expensive. We just talked about business cards and, having a letterhead, even if it's designed electronically. So basically you put your logo on a Microsoft Word document, but you're using your branding and fonts and stuff. So if you send somebody an estimate, or you send somebody a proposal, or, that it looks like your stuff. One of the things that I've done on several occasions is to be a sponsor. So I sponsor the Portland Child Art Center's calendar. It cost me $100 a year. You can sponsor at various events. You can sponsor podcasts. If there's a podcast that really is a great fit for what you have, ask them what their sponsorship would cost. It might be that you could get, 3 shows for, $50 each or something, but that is not a bad idea. Participating in, like local events, festivals, farmers market, art shares, trade shows, setting up a booth is a way to get the word out. So probably the easiest of all these is online via social media posts, but you need to be strategic about it and really make sure that you're posting in the right, the right material. Finding clients. So advertising is kind of trying to find clients in a really generic way, but there's a lot of things that you can do personally to find clients. So starting with people is really helpful. So once you decide you're in business, letting your friends and relatives know that, you're ready to work. Networking, I know it's really difficult if you're shy and you don't, especially these days with COVID, there haven't been as many opportunities. But there's all sorts of local business associations. There are, what they call not LinkedIn, but there are various business groups that you can be a part of and go out there and meet people. Lots of times the business associations will have, featured business. And so you'll get a chance to get up and give a talk to people and stuff. But it does take effort. So Stony, yes, I see you raised a hand.
Yes, ma'am. While I was in the Army, I did a ton of different schools for all kinds of different reasons. And while I was learning stuff there, it was great. The best thing to come out of most of those schools was the networking. Mm-hmm. So my fellow students helped me more with career progression and advice and working for this guy. What is he like? What is he not like? What do I need to avoid? Slack is a fantastic resource. And there's the alumni group that Bruce set up that is phenomenal. And I mean, don't overlook the power of the list of names that we're looking at right now. So
Yes, yes, that's actually an excellent point. And all of the other organizations you've ever been a part of, you know, do you belong to a church? Are you, you know, who are the people you went to high school with? Just your neighbors, you know, that it all is part of your network. And that's really a good point. So thank you for making that. There's always LinkedIn. Once again, LinkedIn is kind of an online version of that same process. So do, you know, be building connections there and pay attention to, you know, to your profile. Facebook professional group. So, you know, I am a member of a number of different Facebook groups, both, you know, like women in business and web developers and, you know, Portland groups and stuff like that. So when you find groups like that, definitely join in. Lots of times, they will give you the opportunity to, you know, link to your business and talk about what you can do for people. And feel, you know, definitely say, hey, anybody from this group that wants what I have to offer, you know, what needs a website, I'll give you, you know, a discount, 10% discount or something. So, you know, have there be an offer for stuff like that. Ask former clients for referrals. So, quite frankly, for me, this is probably my biggest avenue for finding clients is when people that I've worked with in the past, somebody says, oh, do you know a web designer? And then, you know, they share my information. So that's really huge once you have enough former clients. But if, you know, there's anybody that, you know, you've done work for, or even ask former employers. So, you know, even if it was a totally different skill set, you could just, you know, if you're on good terms with them and they liked you, and then, you know, let them know, hey, I just wanted to let you know I'm in business now and I'm doing this. And if, you know of anybody, you know, pass my name, feel free to pass my information. So, like, as I just mentioned, offering discounts is always a good way to kind of help people get started. Doing pro bono work for nonprofits is also a good way to get some examples of what you can do, support a nonprofit, and, you know, then people, you know, it's just another great piece. And it says a lot about you as a person and your values as a business, depending on, you know, which nonprofit you work with. And yes, you can do online work source sites like Fiverr and what is it, Upwork, but be very careful. Don't underprice yourself. Realize that a lot of people out there are willing to do a crazy amount of work for a really small amount of money. And, you know, some of them are living in other countries. They have a lot less overhead. But market the value of what you have, market the quality of what you have. And part of the way you do that is by setting a reasonable price for yourself. And we'll be talking about your hourly rate here. The one thing I want to make sure that I tell you guys is don't do spec work. What that means is, you know, like, hey, I'll build you a website and you can pay me if you like it. It shows that you don't value your own work. And doing work, you know, as an example, means it's not going to be your best work, because your best work takes time and it takes feedback from the client and it takes research. And it just belittles the quality of, you know, what we're all trying to do here. So this was something I learned from the Graphic Artists Guild when I graduated from Portland State University. And it still is true today. Things, you know, yes, there are design contests out there. It's like, oh, build us a design, you know, website and we'll pick the one we like. It's not going to be your best work because it takes time and effort and research to, you know, do good work. So anyways, with that, all right, so screen sharing has stopped. Yes. How are we doing on time? We've got 7 minutes. All right, so let me just get back here to the module. So I have to close PowerPoint. But the window I have selected is invalid. What? Okay. All right, let's try it again. How can it be invalid? Oh, I think there's something about oh, show all windows. Here we go. All right. So all of those screens are there as a PDF. All those slides are there as a PDF. So this is the resource I wanted to share with you. That this is the SBDC. And basically this is how I got started. And there's all sorts of free online training available. There's podcasts and, you know, various events and webinars that you can sign up for. So definitely look into those if that's something that you wanted to do. In Washington State, you're going to apply for a business license. You're going to start at the Washington, I guess, DOR, I'm not sure what, Department of Revenue.wa.gov. And so you go through applying for a business license, and they have a business licensing wizard where you can step through that stuff. So as far as time tracking goes, this is the app that I use, and it has saved me a ton of time and effort. So one of the things that I can do with it is, you know, I track time. So, you know, I set up various clients, and for each client, then I'll set up a project, decide what my tasks are for the project itself, and then start tracking the time. At the end of the month, I go through and it automatically calculates the hours and creates an invoice for me. It also, so the invoices, you know, are based on the amount of time that I reported and the price per hour for that particular task. And then it creates this great invoice, and I review it, I email it, and it also tells me if people have paid. So it doesn't keep track of checks. It does keep track of when they have paid online. And then, you know, I go through there, and, you know, the fact that it lets clients pay online is great. So it really, and, you know, keeps me on top of things. It takes a lot less time than when I used to track time in Excel and then have to create an invoice in QuickBooks. QuickBooks does have more time tracking available now, but I just find Harvest is so easy to use. It really makes a huge difference. And I can integrate it with QuickBooks and other apps that I have. So that's the one that I use. I know I've heard a really good thing about Toggle. And so Toggle is another one, FreshBooks is another one. There are various ways to do online time tracking, but it will, you know, it seems like, you know, an unnecessary expense, but it will save you so much time keeping track of all this stuff. And of course, then I do use QuickBooks for my bookkeeping, and Harvest and QuickBooks can mesh together so that when somebody shows that they've paid, it shows up as being paid in QuickBooks. So those are the tools that I have been using. And I've got links to business name, and I don't have links for Harvest and everything yet in the module, but I'll make sure to get that done. This spreadsheet is really handy. It's well worth downloading it. And so you can say, yeah, how much do I want to make? So you can start off with, you know, oh, what will it take for me to make $20,000, you know, $20,000 in a year, for example. So this would be your total salary. You can start off from there. You can figure out how many hours do you want to work. So this one is based on, you know, 40-hour weeks. So if you only want to work 30-hour weeks, you can do that. 60% billable. So basically that's the percentage of hours, your total number of working hours in a week that will be billable at a reasonable rate. So for me, that's actually a good target. There are some weeks it's 50% billable. There are some weeks where it's 80% billable. And the way I know that is, you know, through Harvest. But some of the things that aren't billable are like, you know, reading your email, you know, shopping for your business, you know, just all those kind of tasks that you do just to keep things running. So then it will come up with your hourly rate. So you have to figure out what, you know, what are your overhead expenses? You know, how much do you need to have every month to pay the, you know, the bills? So your overhead plus your salary, so you add them up. And basically, you know, you use the spreadsheet and it will tell you what you should be charging people. And, you know, it's not going to be 15 bucks an hour. Let me just put it that way. So some of these next pages here, let me just kind of go out and take a look at them really quick because I don't want to run too long. I know the videos takes a little while. All right. So this actually, I really suggest you guys take the time to watch it. It's Mike Monteiro. It does take 40 minutes, but he's just got a ton of great information about how to work with clients as a designer. And he's always entertaining. So he does use some swear words. So if that offends you, feel free not to watch it, but you know, he's always very upfront. This video is a really short video. It's 2 minutes, but it has some great scenarios of, you know, vendor-client relationships. And trying to remember what this one was. Okay, so once again, this is, you know, talking about getting from a business idea to a business model. All right, so is there anything else I want to point out? Talk about prototyping, telling your story. Yeah, please, you know, definitely check all these out. So your writing assignments for this week are going to be similar to what we did last week, talking about doing a little bit of research on your own about the business of the web, and writing a brief scenario there. So, all right, so this is going to be the video we're going to watch in a minute. And then your assignment will be to write a brief report about this. So once again, a few paragraphs, probably 3 paragraphs about it, and then a single paragraph, and then a single sentence. So for now, I'm going to stop screen sharing. We're going to take 5 minutes for a break, and then we'll come back and we'll watch Dana's presentation about how to work with RFPs and proposals, which if you work with any government agency, that's what you'll be doing. So, all right, for now, let's take a quick break and we'll see you guys in 5 minutes. Okay, so let's reconnect here, and I'm going to go ahead and start the video. So once again, an RFP is a request for proposal, and Dana will explain more about them. So. Wait a minute, I need to stop sharing because I need to optimize for video. So share the screen, share sound, optimize for video. All right, cool. That should do it. All right, so can everybody see the video?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Yes, there's a black screen right in the middle of it though.
Oh, okay. Let me. I think that was one of my settings. All right. All right, let's try it. Now I'm not optimizing for video, but I am sharing sound. So let's see. So is the black screen gone?
Yep.
Thank you for mentioning that. Okay.
So, oh, there's Dana. Hi, Dana. How are you?
I'm good. Hello, everyone. Hello, Feline.
Hi.
See your face.
I know, it's been so long.
Is the audio loud
Okay,
enough?
you guys, I would like to introduce Dana Ward. She is our speaker for
It's good for me.
Okay.
30 minutes or so, and you'll have a chance to ask her questions. She's going to be telling us a little bit about her experience as a proposal. What is your title now?
I got about 5 titles, but one of the things that applies is proposal manager.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so her role is a proposal manager, and she's going to explain the world of RFPs, proposals, statements of work, and all of that kind of stuff. So Dana, the floor is yours.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here. I actually did a few slides so you wouldn't have to just look at my face this whole time. So I'm going to share those. The problem with slides, though, is that it's harder for me to see if like you chat something, or if you raise your hand, it's harder for me to see that because it gets blocked out. So if you have a question that, or something's going wrong with my presentation that is messing it up, just please someone say something on audio. I can always hear the audio. So I don't always see everything else. So I'm going to share my screen. And then I'm going to quickly, can you all see this image of the presentation here? It says all about RFPs.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
I can see it.
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm not going to put it in full presentation mode if you guys are okay with that. Well, maybe I will because it's pretty small in some places. Let's see if this works. Doesn't always work. Can you all still see it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. So just a little bit about me. What I do with RFPs is I work for an engineering firm and professional services firm. So we do all kinds of stuff: operations and maintenance, architecture, construction management, you name it, in that realm. And my job is to, the way we get work is by responding to an RFP from a client. And we have to put together a proposal based on RFP, and I manage the proposal put together process. That's kind of just the way to say it. And I've done that for about 16, 17 years now. So it's pretty much what I do all day. So I'm going to give you kind of a quick, I'm just going to talk for about half an hour, and we'll do Q&A at the end. But if there's something that you don't understand that I'm talking about, go ahead and just chime in. I'm happy to take questions as we go if that's helpful at all. I'm going to cover what is an RFP, what does the RFP process entail, kind of an anatomy of an RFP and how to respond effectively, and then where to find available RFPs. And then we'll have a full Q&A session at the end for if you just want to wait till the end. So what is an RFP? So they're called different things, actually. RFP stands for Request for Proposal. Sometimes they're called Requests for Qualifications, an RFQ, request for quote, which is also an RFQ, so that's confusing. They're sometimes called bids or requests for bid or a solicitation. I've seen them called requests for information. They've got all kinds of titles, though usually the word request is always in there. What they are is typically they're done by government agencies, though private companies do use them also for certain things. They're an official process for procuring products and services. So the government agencies have lots of rules about how they can fairly procure processes. So there's no sort of, you know, backdoor dealing or unfair processes that funnel public money to, you know, your best friend. So the process is pretty structured. As a result, it's pretty, you know, there's a lot of rules and regulations. It's also a legal document. Once you sign a contract with the client, what's in that RFP becomes part of the contract that you sign. So it's really important to be aware of what's in it. And then as a result of that, when you respond, when you turn a proposal in response to a request for RFP, they call that responding. That's often seen as agreeing to everything in that RFP document unless you say otherwise. And I'll talk about I'll talk a bit about that as we go further through the RFP anatomy of an RFP section. But first, let's take a look at what the process entails. So there's a period where the client prepares the RFP document internally. They have their legal department look at it. They have the procurement department look at it, the people that want the services. So for in the case of web design or a website development, whoever needs that done, they kind of come up with a list of what they want. Then the procurement people look at it and they go back and forth. And while that's happening, it's generally not public, but you are able as a member of the public to ask questions of the agencies if those sorts of things are going on. Or if you know someone at the agency that's putting together an RFP, it can be helpful to find out from them kind of what it involves and kind of get yourself in the know in advance and keep an eye out. That's all totally fair until the RFP is released. And usually once the RFP hits the streets, there's usually language in the RFP that says you can't talk in the background anymore with the client. So if you have a friend that is on the group that wants to put this website together, there's probably rules about how you're not allowed to do that. You can only talk to their official designees. That's usually laid out in the RFP. You find them on usually the client's procurement website. And I'll talk a little bit at the end about how to sign up for those websites and how to get email notifications about RFPs that come out in the areas that you're interested in. And some small clients will often use like a big bundle site, like the state of Oregon's main RFP site. Lots of little towns and cities or some of the universities will use those that big Oregon site to publish their RFPs because it's just easier for them to get more response that way. So then once the RFP is released, the bidders, the proposers, whatever you want to call them, us folks that want to do that work to see if we can get the job, prepare our proposals, and you have to follow all the instructions, and I'll talk about that in the next section. And then the due date comes, and the due date's super important. I'm going to say this again, but I'll say it here because it's super important. Those due dates are super hard. So I have in the past had a proposal where everything went wrong the day that it was due and we were printing it. And it was just a series of worst case scenarios. Everything went wrong. We got to the client and delivered it 4 minutes late from the time it was due, and we were disqualified. 4 minutes. So those due dates and times are super important, and I can't stress that enough. Clients then, after they come in, they review the proposals. They have a set of evaluation criteria and a scoring sheet, and they usually have a selection committee. It's never, ever that I've seen, at least with public proposals or public agencies, just one person deciding. It's always a selection committee to try to make the process fair. And then a winner is announced, hooray! And that is usually done over email, and it usually goes out to the winner as an email. It may go to everybody that proposed. Some, though, clients won't email everybody. They'll just post it on their procurement website. So if you don't hear anything, you can keep checking and see if it's been posted. But if they want you, they usually do email the winner. And then there's this negotiation stage and when you sign the contract. And this is kind of a last chance to make adjustments, and I'll talk about that as well. But that's sort of keep that in mind as you're preparing RFPs and going through the process. You're probably not going to turn around and get the job like the next day. Once you turn it in, there's some steps along the way. And then at the point where the contract is signed, work begins. And I would advise everyone to not start work until you have a signed contract, because things can go wrong and you don't have any recourse to go back and force them to pay you for the time you spend until that contract is signed. So just keep that in mind as you're going. That's a best practice amongst my company for sure. And there are kind of two categories of RFPs. There's on-calls, or they sometimes call them master service agreements, where you are their go-to web designer or their go-to web maintenance person, as an example. And that on-call is, they'll let you know when they need you, but it's not a steady, like defined project at any one given moment. The other is a project RFP, where they lay out for you exactly what they want done, and then you tell them how you're going to do it. And as soon as the work begins, you work on that project until it's finished. So you can kind of count on that that's a real set of work and a real set of money that you will get as a result. Whereas on-calls are not a guarantee that you'll get work. It's as needed, if that makes sense. Okie doke. Now I'm going to go through the anatomy of an RFP. So, and I'll talk a bit about how to respond effectively to all these parts. Almost every RFP has kind of the same key chunks. What's in the RFP will vary from project and client, whatever the need is, but there are always sort of these main things that are in every RFP, and you kind of have to do the same thing in every case. So I'm going to talk about those to help you understand when you go to respond to RFPs, kind of what's expected of all those main chunks and what to be aware of. And I'm going to switch over now. I'm going to just pause out of my slideshow, and I'm actually going to show you this RFP from the University of Oregon for a website development. It says web app development, but it's kind of more than that. It's also a web site. And I'm just going to walk us through it. It's pretty small. I'm going to blow it up because I know this is tiny, but that gives you a sense of it. Tell me, is that viewable? Can you sort of see what's there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So the first page always has the due date, because as I mentioned, that's super important. So you'll want to make sure that's kind of tattooed in your head. When is it due, and make sure that you plan to submit it well before that. Like I said, you can't even be a minute late without risking being disqualified. This is usually on the first page of the RFP because it's so important, but sometimes it gets buried in the document somewhere and you have to go and look for it. But it's always somewhere. If there's no due date, then you should ask when they want it, because that's a big oversight. I've never seen one without one though, so that's unlikely. Okay, so the beginning of every RFP, like the first sections of every RFP, give you some background about the reasons for the project or the reasons for the on-call services they need, and kind of the goals for what they want to do with the project, as well as a summary of all the parts. So in this one, they called it an introduction. Sometimes they call it background. They have different names, but it's always just the same idea. In this one, they talk about what they want this app to be able to do. So they have all the sort of, I'm gonna scroll here. They have, all these parts that they want done. So they want it aesthetically pleasing. They want you to maximize the user interface and the user experience. They tell you kind of what capabilities it should have. So these are like all the elements involved in what they want. And this is for a special study. They're creating a website to kind of support the study. So they're, kind of talking about this study and who's going to use it and what needs there are for the elements. And you just want to read every single word. I swear these are really boring. I get it. I've read hundreds of RFPs. They're get a big cup of coffee and just go through and read every word. Try to be sure you understand it. If you don't, ask someone else who you trust to read it and tell them if they understand what this means. You can ask questions, and I'll talk about that in a bit, but you want to understand what they're asking for sure throughout. So that's the first thing. Make sure you understand the background and what the goals are. And then take that information, and it's really important in your RFP to show that you understand when you put your proposal together what they're asking for. Because if you don't communicate to them, you get what they want, that you want all these pieces and you want it to all work in these certain ways, communicate back to them what you believe they want. That shows them that you get what they're doing, and you can actually jump ahead of somebody who also proposes, who doesn't take the time to do that. Clients like to know that the person they're hiring gets it. So that's a big thing to be sure and include in some way in your proposal. And I wouldn't just repeat back I wouldn't repeat back the RFP language verbatim. That would be not cool. But just describe in a few paragraphs what you understand they want. And I will point out this little pink note here. I don't know if you guys, it's so small, but I don't know if you can see it. So it says, this is the budget. Often they'll tell you in an RFP how much money they expect they're going to spend on the project. And in this one, they say it's between $18,000 and $40,000. And it says all pricing is negotiable. That means they're going to try to negotiate with you as well as you negotiating with them. So keep that in mind. I always say price a little higher than you think, but not too high. Be realistic. And don't assume that 40,000 number is a safe number to propose. If you're like, oh, wow, that's a lot more than I think it'll take. That's so much money. I want that amount. I mean, don't we all? But they will get other proposals from people who are realistic and honest about what it'll take, and that'll boot you out. So be, real about what you think it'll take for you to do it, and be reasonable. But also, if you don't think you can do everything they want for 40,000 based on your standard fees, and a lot of these little clients, U of O is not a little client, but some of the little town clients, they don't have much money, and they'll ask for something at a really low price. If you think, gosh, I'm going to put so many hours into this and that's going to be like work out to $5 an hour, just walk away. Don't bother proposing, because it's not going to be worth it to you to spend your money on your time on something where you're not going to be able to negotiate up. They're not going to go above their top price, and it's not worth it to you. So keep that in mind as well. You want to understand what it's going to be worth to you before you even start. Okay, I'm going to go to the next section, which is the scope of services, or sometimes called the scope of work. A lot of this, they're going to ask you to provide a summary of this and tell them what it's going to cost. So most RFPs tell you what they want you to do. They give you a scope of services or a scope of work or a statement of work or statement of services. They have lots of names, but this section is in almost every RFP. I've never seen one that doesn't have it, where they describe very clearly, sometimes in minute detail, sometimes generally, what they want you to do. And this is all the sort of things they expect. So, they want a website rendering engine, content delivery network, it's going to HTML and CSS. I mean, it's some of it's super basic, but again, you want to repeat back to them that you understand what they're looking for. As a government agency, they are required to do this 508 accessibility, which makes it accessible to visually and hearing impaired individuals. If you don't have that capability, you want to think about, oh, who could do this for me? This is the section where you're like, if I can't do something here, who could do it for me? And then you can, depending on the statement of work and kind of how it's structured, you can use it to sort of as an outline for your pricing, sort of just say this element will cost this much, this will cost this much. Some statements of work aren't structured in a way that works. You don't have to parrot this back to them exactly, but again, do read everything so you're sure you understand and you've covered everything they want. Because if there's something here that they want and you can't do, if you don't say what your plan is for dealing with it or that you can't do it, you can get disqualified because they think of you as non-responsive. You haven't addressed everything in their RFP. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this pink one here. So this is another element as you price. This is a good one to think about. This one is just a little line. You will provide ongoing maintenance support proposer must be capable to support the project for the entire term of the study. This means that you're going to have to help them out whenever they need it. Well, what does that mean? They don't lay out here how many hours that is. I would suggest that not only do you need to price this, obviously, into your total fee, you probably want to include some assumptions. You just write them out underneath your, put little asterisks by that part of your fee and say, we're assuming so many hours for ongoing support and maintenance. This fee is based on so many hours. When you get to the negotiation stage, they may come back to you and say, oh, we think it's going to be way more hours than that. Can you reprice based on that? Which is great for you because then you're not having to, eat that. Or they may come back and say, oh, we don't think we need that much support. And can you, lower your price? And then you have to say, well, I want to include this assumption then that my price is then made based on this many hours. And if it goes over that many, I need to be paid at an hourly rate for every hour over that or something like that. So keep those things in mind as you're responding here to what this could mean from the client's point of view versus your point of view. And then this yellow bit down here. So this is an interesting thing. I'm gonna recall this as we go a little further through the RFP, because RFPs often have contradictions in them. And you're like, well, which is right? And this is an example, and we'll talk about how it gets contradicted a little further along. Proposers must be able to execute all work in-house. The hiring of subcontractors is not allowed without university pre-approval. Well, that basically says that you have to do everything yourself. Do you have that capability? A lot of freelancers or small shops will subcontract out specialty capabilities, and then they'll include that in their proposal that, we're going to subcontract this element to this firm, and you include some information about that firm. You ask them to provide you, or that, freelancer, you ask them to provide you with their estimate of what their part would cost. I have seen most companies add a tiny amount of markup to that, where you just say like 5 or 10% more on top of whatever they tell you to cover your cost to sort of deal with, taking the money from the university and handing it over to them and getting their billing and billing it back to the university, because you're going to serve as a middleman between that subcontractor and, like in this case, the University of Oregon. So let's see, last thing I'm going to say there is, okay, just remember this because we're going to talk about it in a second. I'm going to go to the next thing. Oops, I jumped a little too fast. Sorry about that. Most RFPs have a timeline when they want the work done. This one has an elaborate schedule. Usually they'll just tell you the completion date, and sometimes they'll ask you for something like this schedule to help them see how you're going to do the work. But sometimes they just say it has to be done by this date, and then you have to put together sort of a timetable for how you think you can get it accomplished. Be sure and look for that completion date. And if it's not there, I would ask it as a formal question, because you can get yourself into trouble if they have assumptions that you're going to get it done much faster than you actually can. So look for that completion date and make sure you find it. And if it's not there, ask about it. The other thing is that I often save these little timetables like this from RFPs for future use on other projects, because it makes me not have to start from scratch. So that's just a little side tip. Okay, next section is called usually, usually the next section is the proposal content requirements. So this is the stuff that they ask you to put in your proposal. And almost every RFP has some pretty specific information they give you that they're like, I want this and this and this in your proposal. They call it lots of different things. Here they call it submittals and qualifications. Sometimes they call it proposal content, proposal format, proposal subject. There's lots of different names, but it's basically what they want you to put in your proposal. It should list everything, and sometimes it's more general and sometimes it's super specific, but they'll give you a sense of the things they want you to show. Sometimes they'll say, show us your qualifications, and they don't really tell you exactly what that means. That just basically means your experience and references. Simple enough. That's what qualifications is talking about. Why are you qualified? Where have you done this before? What is your education? And can you give us some references that can attest to it? I will say, though, that these are not suggestions. They're absolutes. If they ask you for it, you must put it in. and you should follow the order that they have. So like here they have 3.1 experience, 3.2 references, 3.3 methodology, and they ask you to use the same numbering. Follow those directions exactly. And the reason is they will give your proposal and everybody else's proposal that submits to the selection committee with a scoring tool or a scoring matrix of some kind. It will follow the RFP. So if your proposal also follows the RFP, it's much easier for them to score you well. So that's the thinking there. Try to not only answer the questions, but show proof that you've done something before. So like in the methodologies, they use this term, the methodologies and standards you've employed in similar services and methods you use to demonstrate their validity. So what they're asking for here is, how do you do this? And give us some examples of where you've done it before. They want proof that you know what you're doing. It's not enough to just say, I'll do this, this, and this, or I can do this and this. They want you to show that that's like, you know what you're talking about and why you know what you're talking about. So keep that in mind. That is a strategy. We teach whole, like 1 week long courses on how to respond to RFPs, showing them, you know, that you know what you're talking about and what kinds of, we call them proofs. How do you prove that you know what you're proposing to do will work? So keep that as a thought as you're preparing, not just what you will do, but why you know you can. Okay, so I'm gonna just scroll down here. We talked briefly just a moment ago about that, that thing about you can't have subs, you have to do everything in-house. And then here, they want you to talk about in your RFP, third-party contractors, a list of all third parties and or subcontractors that you intend to use or may use in connection with performance of the services described in the RFQ. And you're like, what the heck? I thought I wasn't allowed to. Now you're telling me to list them? Why would I list something I'm not allowed to do? This is really common in RFPs. And the reason is because they recycle these RFPs from one project to another. A jillion people edit them. And this kind of stuff gets added by one person and taken out by another. And it gets, it's not uncommon to have contradictions. This is something you would ask a question about. You would ask a formal question just to say, hey, you know, can I use other contractors? You say in this section, I'm not allowed to, but in the proposal content section, you're telling me I need to list them. Could you clarify? And just note, the other thing is that if they say, yes, you can, and we want you to use this section, but you can do everything in a house and you don't need any subcontractors, don't skip this section. Put it in your proposal, put 3.13 third-party subcontractors, and then as the heading, and then say, we don't intend to use any third-party subcontractors because we can do everything in-house and we're awesome. I mean, that kind of thing. So you just don't want to leave it out because like I said before, they want everything and they can disqualify you as unresponsive if you don't provide everything they request. So just little tips so you don't get yourself in trouble. So the other thing, before I go on to the next section, two things that aren't included in this list, but are kind of assumed you always will do, so they often don't list them, are a front and back cover. And usually these are fairly nicely designed. They don't have to be, but as web designers and people with skills in that way, if you have those skills, definitely make a nicely designed cover and back. Even if it's an electronic submittal, it's something that most people that review RFPs sort of expect. And so if you don't have it, you may not stand out or you may not look as polished as another firm or another freelancer that does do it. The other thing is a cover letter that usually comes right behind the front cover. So you have a front cover, the cover letter, and then your whole proposal. And the cover letter is just written like a business letter, you know, with like the address blocks at the top and a little subject line. And then the content of it should be a quick summary of who you are, why you're good at this particular kind of work, if you've got any sort of special tools or tricks or anything that you think makes you stand out from the other people that might propose, include that in the cover letter. Think of it as like a baby executive summary. that where you're just giving them the high points. So if you've got somebody who doesn't read anything else, but they only read the cover letter, they get all the main things. Don't put your price in the cover letter though, unless you think that you have some clever way to save them lots of money. But usually they don't expect to see the price in the cover letter. And in some cases, they won't even let you put the price in the proposal. They'll ask that you put it in a separate envelope. And in those cases, you definitely don't want to talk about your price anywhere in the proposal, because what they do is they keep that envelope sealed until they decide on who is the most qualified. And then they decide, okay, this is the one we want because they're the most qualified. We're not going to let price prejudice us. And then they'll open the envelope and say, okay, here's their price. Let's contact them and start negotiations. So you may see that as well. Sometimes they do that, sometimes they don't. In this case, they did not do that. They have the price right in the proposal. Okay. The next section is what is basically, I'm sorry, I just screened past it, is the instructions for submitting the proposal. So this is kind of, there's a lot of content that's usually carried in this section. The main things are, like this pink highlight here, is how you submit the proposal. Where do you submit it? Are you snail mailing it to a physical address and need to print copies? Are you emailing it somewhere? Or is there an electronic upload site for their procurement system? In this case, it's an electronic upload. A lot of times they'll tell you how big the file can be. They sometimes will even dictate other formatting within the document. I've seen them dictate things as like the font size, the margins, the file, they'll even dictate the font. Oregon Department of Transportation used to dictate every proposal was Times New Roman 12 point. It was horrible. They also sometimes give you page limits or other formatting requirements. Follow those. Again, it's something where you can get disqualified if they figure out you haven't followed it. It can be really hard to squeeze stuff into a page limit sometimes, but better to cut stuff out than go over the page limit and get disqualified. So, think about that in those terms. So here, I will say the last thing I would say about electronic uploads is give yourself plenty of time, at least several hours before the proposal is due, to upload your file. If you're like working right up to the end, not advised, I can tell you these government sites are old and clunky most of the time. I swear they're designed to be the most counterintuitive, weird systems you've ever encountered. And sometimes the first time you use them, they can be mind-boggling. I've had times where I thought it would take me 45 minutes and it took me 3 hours because I had to call the client's web person and they didn't understand it. It's that kind of thing. So just give yourself lots of time. In the case of this blue item here, they tell you what you need to include in the subject line if it's an email or on the label of the box or whatever. Follow all of that. Look to see if they've given you that instruction. Sometimes they don't, but if they do, they want you to do it. Same thing. They sometimes will tell you this green highlight says it has to be an MS Word, Excel, or PDF. So these days, they don't usually exclude PDF out of that list because, that's kind of weird. But if they make you give it to them in MS Word and you don't have MS Word, that you need to think about what are you going to do there. They don't do that very often anymore, though, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. They used to do that a lot. Remember when we were at the first page and I said sometimes they put the time and date, bury it deep in the proposal? Well, here they've done both. They buried it deep here in section 4.4, but it's also on the first page. Check and make sure those two match. I've seen proposals where they have different times or different dates in the two different places. And then that's another question you want to ask because you don't want to do the wrong one. And then here's the questions. So every proposal will tell you the official way to ask questions. And here's the thing. They will tell you every time that if you call and ask the question and someone gives you a response, that's not an official response and they won't stick to it unless it's issued as an addendum or an official Q&A response. So you want to follow the instructions they give for written questions. Here they say, send it to this email. They will issue these addendums or Q&A responses. Usually, if they ask you to sign up to show that you're going to respond with an email, they'll send it to all the emails that they have, all the people that are intending to respond. But sometimes, like here, they say they're not going to do that, and you just have to check the procurement website. So check the procurement website at least once a week before the RFP is due to see if they've responded to the questions. More often if the questions are holding you up. And then if they don't respond, you can sometimes submit a question saying, when are you going to respond? And then that sometimes triggers them. Don't do that a bunch of times though, that will annoy them. And then lastly, every RFP usually has something like this salmon bit here that tells you how they're going to score or evaluate the proposals they get. Sometimes they give you very elaborate information and they'll tell you exactly how many points each section that they ask for is worth. So the experience section is worth 50 points and your methodology is worth 20 points and your overall statement of work is worth 40 points. Sometimes they'll give you that and you can sort of gauge how much space to address to each section based on how much they're going to score it. Sometimes I use that to help me, like, do I need to spend a lot of time if they're only going to give it 10 points? But here they just say price might be a factor and other factors will be whatever they think they need is the best value to them. So that's not super helpful in this particular case. But sometimes they do give you really helpful information. And if they spell it out, sometimes they'll have like paragraphs worth of information about how they're going to evaluate your proposal. If they say, we want people who have at least 3 years of experience doing these kinds of things, be sure you say that in that part of the proposal. Make sure that you are exactly, I use that evaluation criteria to make sure I can score the most points. So keep that in mind when they give you evaluation criteria that you can get the most out of it possible. All right, so let's talk real quickly about best and final offer. This is what happens at the very end. They will come back to you, as I said, they'll ask you sometimes, they don't always do this, but sometimes when they have decided who they're gonna select, they'll come back to you and say, we wanna make these adjustments, or we think your price is a little high, can you give us a best and final offer? And it's sometimes called a BAFO, best and final offer, BAFO. And they sometimes will go to more than one proposer and see who gives them the better price. So my strategy for this is, again, be honest and realistic, but also think in terms of how low you're willing to go and keep that in your back pocket because they may come back again. I wouldn't go to your bottom line low price first time out. They may come back and just say, that's still not going to work for us. We're going to move on. And you can say, they may say, oh, we're going to go to a different proposer because your price is still too high, and just say, okay, well, I've done my bottom line score and I could go down just a teeny bit more. Can I do one more round? So keep that in your back pocket because you want to have room to move. Oh, excuse me. I bumped when I was talking there. And then the other thing about the best and final offer is that you should know what's too low. So what is the bottom line? I can't go any lower. I won't make money on this. This isn't worth it to me. And be prepared to walk away. There's no shame in walking away. People do it all the time in my business. When the client wants something cheaper than we can realistically make money at it, your business is your responsibility, not theirs, and they're not going to look out for you. You have to do that. So walk away if it's too low. Okay, one quick thing about trade secrets. Every Oregon and Washington proposal will, or RFP will have something about trade secrets or proprietary information or confidential information. They'll tell you that if you have something you don't want to go to the public, you can mark it. And the reason is, in Oregon and Washington, anything that goes to a public agency as a proposal comes under public records law. And once the proposal process is over and the contract is signed, anyone can ask to see your proposal. And the state or city or whatever government agency has to let them see it. And anything that you can deem a trade secret, unique to you, or proprietary to you, or confidential to you, you can ask to be marked as confidential or trade secret. They use different language in every RFP. The one thing I would say is you can describe that in your proposal, what parts of it are confidential. Do not say the whole proposal is confidential. First of all, it can't be. Not every word in your proposal is confidential. And that really makes clients mad, because then they have to bring their lawyers in to figure out how they force you to say it's not. And then they probably will just release your whole proposal in the end anyway, because they're just like, yeah, no. So don't do that. Don't say it's all confidential. Most times, you probably don't have trade secrets for the most part. Everybody's probably doing the same things. This is more common for, sort of advanced front edge manufacturing, banking, those kinds of things. It's not so common for the kind of work that, say, web designer, website building, or like what I do in engineering. Not very much of what we do is proprietary either. So, okay, I think, let's see. I managed to accidentally split my screen, so let me. Actually, I think I'm right here at the end, so that should do it. Okay. Yep, so the last thing I'll say is the contract. Oh, gee.
It looked like it was under window and then split.
Yeah, I just rolled it up. Thank you, though.
Nice. You're welcome.
So the last thing to talk about is contracts. So these, like I said, the RFP is part of the contract, but they will also provide you with a copy of their standard contract terms and conditions. Every little unit in every little government entity in the world has a standard terms and conditions contract. You'll want to be sure and find that. If it's not in the RFP, sometimes it's on their website as, this is the standard contract and it's just sitting out there for anyone to grab. In this case, they've attached it as Exhibit A, and they have said this language that says, by providing a proposal to this RFQ, the proposer agrees to the terms and conditions, including all relevant insurance provisions contained in herein, and further agrees to all the university terms and conditions in Exhibit A. And then it says modifications of any attached university's terms must be submitted as part of the proposal. So get yourself a really strong cup of coffee and read the whole contract. And it is the worst. I mean, RFPs are bad. This is like 100 times worse. If there's stuff in here that you don't.
Okay, you guys, it's 2:50 right now, which is the end of the class. It looks like there's, let's see, how much time is left on the video? Because I remember we ran over.
About 16 minutes.
About 16 minutes. So I will go ahead and continue playing it, but if you guys need to move on to the next class, please, feel free to do so. And you can watch the last 16 minutes later. We're up to minute 40. So feel free to, either leave class now or, or watch the rest of it later. All right, so let's resume.
Understand, and that is probably likely because there always is stuff I don't understand. If you have a legal advisor of some kind, I would consult them. It's probably expensive to have someone read this whole terms and conditions and then give you advice on it. Probably not necessary for something like web apps where you're not going to be held liable, for some massive problem for the most part. I mean, I think about the Oregon Health Plan web app that Oracle did that went like completely bust, but that was a massive project. For a smaller thing, I don't think you're going to be in big trouble. But be sure you do understand. The big ones are indemnity. That's your liability. What are you considered liable for? And here they say you're liable for everything that goes wrong and nobody else is. You can't hold the university responsible. But again, what are the real sort of elements that could go wrong that you could be liable for? Somebody couldn't use the site for some day. Well, that's normal. That's not abnormal. So you're looking at what's abnormal, that you caused it because you were not professional in what you did, or what you provided them was a piece of crap. So I would, if you are concerned, have some legal advisor take a look at the parts that you're concerned about. Definitely the indemnity, which is the liability stuff. And then always look for the insurance requirements. Okay, so almost every one of these RFPs will have these terms and conditions will have insurance that is you're required to carry while you're doing the project for them. So in this case, they want you to have not less than 2 million for each occurrence and 5 million in aggregate. So first thing, before you even start to respond, I would go to your business insurance provider and ask them how much this will increase your premium for the term of this project. You don't have to carry it after it's done. The day you're done, you can just cancel the insurance. I've done this before. I had to carry $1 million in aggregate on a contract I had with TriMet long ago. I contacted my insurance provider. I said, this is what they're asking for. And they're like, yeah, you know, the liability here is so unlikely to be significant at the $1 million level that it was $100 more a year. It was like to add it to my insurance. So what you do then is once you find that out from your business insurance provider, you add that onto your fee. You don't need to eat that. You need to add it into what you're charging them. They're requiring you to carry this insurance. They can pay for it. You don't need to say that. You just tack it in, add a little bit to your hourly rate so it, you get that amount covered in your total fee. But or however you want to structure it in how you price your fee. But you shouldn't eat it. You shouldn't add it to what's a part of your fee. And like I said, it usually is not super expensive to add it on, and you can just drop it the second you're done with your project. Give yourself a reminder on your calendar, call insurance and drop.
Dana, we've already done 40 minutes, so I'm just kind of like letting you.
Okay, I am done then, so okay. I can. Yeah, this was the last thing. Insurance was the last thing on my list.
Oh, this has been wonderful. Yeah, and I actually mentioned to them a little bit earlier in the class today about how insurance was one of those basic things that you need to get from the get-go.
Right.
And stuff. So I know I have learned a bunch, and I've answered a lot of RFPs and have helped to write some RFPs. The one thing that I was going to mention too is right now in kind of my business recently, I've run into RFPs mostly working with nonprofits or kind of like business organizations. For example, the Rose City Yarn Crawl a few years ago, they had, formal RFP. There's one for the Professional Glass Blowers Institute. So in addition to, state big entities, some of these smaller entities also have RFPs. So it's just really, really good to know about.
And I would say most big private companies are not going to have RFPs that freelancers or small shops could respond to.
Yeah.
And they're the ones in private business that tend to give out RFPs. The smaller to medium-sized companies, they don't issue an RFP. They just go looking for the services. So you're going to find that work elsewhere. But for government agencies, this is the only way you get it. This is the only way to get the work. And it's good work if you can get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So do you guys have questions?
Yeah, where's a good place to go and find these RFPs?
I'll send, if it's okay with Feline, I'll send a little list, but just the two big ones are for the state of Washington. The one that they have is called, just Google Washington bid opportunities. You'll get their website. You'll find there's a ton of stuff on their website for how to register. Just register, and in that registration, you can include the types of work that you do, so the types of RFPs you're interested in, and then you can request notifications. You may end up getting a deluge. You might need to do some kind of little special, script on your email to dump it into a folder. But then you get like all the RFPs that come out from the entire state of Washington for the types of work that you do. So that's super helpful. And then the Oregon one is called ORPIN, ORPIN. And it's the same deal. You want to register, you have to, hop through several clunky fields and put in your name, address, phone number, business name, blah, blah, blah. indicate what fields of work you're interested in, and then you'll get those emails. So those are the two big ones. And then all the local cities and governments that are around the area, you can just go Google their procurement websites and you can do the same thing. A lot of them don't have email notifications, so you kind of just have to cruise through them from time to time and see what they're up to. I sometimes used to call the procurement folks at the big cities and say, hey, you got any, web or, I did communications, marketing communications. You got anything like that you normally do or that you would do, and talk with them. And sometimes they'll keep a list of people that are interested in certain kinds of work. So that's another way to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Hey, look at how many of you stuck around. That's great. So yeah, that was a ton of information, but Dana did a really great job of explaining how RFPs work. Obviously, it's pretty complicated, but it is something that, as I mentioned in my own comments, that's something that I've run across with nonprofits. I've run across with events. Lots of times, it's just the easiest way to get web bids is to make sure everybody does it really consistently. So through an RFP, they can make sure that you're not comparing estimates that include, totally different types of products. So, all right, well, it's 3 p.m. I'm going to let you guys go. Let me know if you have any questions via Slack. And I'm going to go add on the materials that Dana gave us last year, because I have to add that to the assignment. So just in case anybody needs it. All right. Talk to you guys later. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.